I love stories far too much to keep them to myself.
Ah, Liliana, a woman after my own heart. And yours too, apparently, because it seems like you guys wouldn't so much as glance at a Sandbox RPG if your lives depended on it, because they don't have a story. Well, dear viewer, I have a few stories for you today that might just change your outlook on these lesser-loved cousins of our beloved CRPGs. They are 4 stories to be precise, and they are all somewhat related. The first one comes from our friends at Mint Mobile, who I am partnering with for today's video. That story goes like this. You only have a few days to snatch the steal of a deal with Mint Mobile. If you purchase any of their wireless plans for 3 months now, you get 3 additional months for free. Let's say you purchase the $25 a month plan, which includes unlimited nationwide talk and text, 20 gigabytes of 5G, free international calls to Mexico and Canada, mobile hotspot, Wi-Fi calling and text. That means you'll be getting 3 months of all of this for free. That's $75 that you are free to spend on some of the other goodies that I am here to tell you about. And if you consider all of the 3 games that we are going to be talking about, including their expansion packs, at their regular price, that's a total of $67.11. That means you would still have $8 to spend on Death Roads, for example. This is a no-brainer of a deal that you can have access to if you visit our partner's link, mintmobile.com/yold. Link in the description below. That's mintmobile.com/yold. You know I like my indie games, right? Well, that's because the ones I like seem to be a lot more in tune with my needs and pain points than AAA titles. And it's the same story with Mint Mobile, guys. Big Wireless isn't the only game in town. These guys don't have BS hidden fees, they cut out the middleman by selling directly to you. They are like the indies of wireless. Think about that, will you? The other 3 stories have to do with the Sandbox RPGs that I want to bring to your attention. Why? Well, first, you probably have heard of games like Mount & Blade, Battle Brothers, and Kenshi. These are the first-in-class games in the ballpark, and I probably don't need to bring those to your attention. But these 3 I'm going to be talking about, well, they don't get as much attention, and I believe they should. Second, all of these games rely quite heavily on their story and lore, which is usually not the case with Sandbox RPGs, and I hear that's one of the big reasons why you aren't crazy about this subgenre. And third, because I like it. So the 3 games are War Tales, Star Traders Frontiers, and Vagrus. And let's start with War Tales. War Tales is a sandbox RPG in which you do a little bit of everything but focuses mostly on combat. It takes place in a low fantasy, early medieval fictitious world. And when I say low fantasy, I really do mean low. Like the most out of the ordinary things you're going to see in this title are ghost enemies and weird modern haircuts. This game is purely sword, shield, ponies, and hardship, and I like it. At the beginning of the game, you choose one of many available templates for your party of adventurers, but you can customize each adventurer individually. You can choose their archetypes, their initial talents, some feats, which is pretty interesting, their gear, and you can even customize their appearance. You even have a pony that you can customize, and the little dude is going to level up in the game just like any other regular human adventurer. Over the course of the game, your party members level. They gain attribute points that you can spend on the stat of your choice, and you learn skills that you can use in combat. You will eventually be able to use these points to plan a career path instead, which makes them more proficient at the role they are supposed to have within the party. Your party also levels up collectively, so to speak, and this is very interesting because everything you do in the game is attached to a path. Taking up missions and seeing them through to the end, for example, advances your party towards the path of power and glory. Crafting alchemical potions and exploring abandoned ruins takes you further down the path of mysteries and wisdom. Each of these paths has its own set of unlockable perks, which means that the more you do of a certain something as a party, the better you become at it. It's like a collective min-maxing that depends on what your party does. Are you going to be a sword for hire company or a medieval independent ruin raiding Indiana Jones type of party? And then of course there are professions for your characters to pursue. and you want to have all of them covered because that's how you make a self-sustaining party that stands a better chance at long-term survival. You need to have a cook, a tinkerer, an angler, an alchemist, and a blacksmith. And all of these guys progress in different ways. Cooks, for example, can learn different recipes and they can get better at them by, well, cooking. Crafting in War Tales seems to have drawn inspiration from Skyrim. And though I am not a huge fan of Skyrim, the crafting in that game was crazy good, so War Tales draws inspiration from the right source in this respect. War Tales doesn't lean too heavily on its story aspect compared to the other two games that we're going to be talking about. You control a party of adventurers who is completely free to do as it pleases. However, if you make your way to the nearest town, you'll see that there are quests for you to undertake, and many of them unfold in unexpected ways that even involve moral choices at some point. And if you think of it, this game is more of a political thermometer than your average political compass test. I find it funny though that I mostly evaluated these conflicts that involve some sort of moral or political decision with a strictly utilitarian criteria, like how likely is it for me to win if I fight for these guys? Or of the two factions in conflict, which is the hardest to beat? Or what loot am I going to get if I side with Group A versus Group B? My party eventually became powerful enough for me to start taking an interest in the actual moral implications of these conflicts. So there you go, there's your daily measly ration of food for thought. War Tales is a sandbox RPG, so it has a lot of moving parts and secondary mechanics. There are professions like alchemy, cooking, blacksmithing, and fishing, there's trade, and even scavenging for artifacts inside dark ruins. The most interesting thing about this though is that each of these moving parts is A, very important to your short, mid, and long-term success and even survival. B, it serves to improve your combat capabilities directly or indirectly, and this is great because like we said, this game is supposed to focus mostly on combat. And C, it's very extremely fun. Professions like fishing and mining, for example, even involve these dumb mini-games that make your rewards feel a little bit more deserved. War Tales also nails the feeling of adventure. You arrive to a town, you talk to people, some of them give you quests, you buy provisions, maybe you hire an additional mercenary, maybe you spend the night at the inn, and you talk to the emissary, who gives you the most important quests. And then you set off to the location where said quests are to be undertaken. You traverse a large, beautiful map filled with landmarks, resources that you can gather, traveling merchants, and potential enemies. Because you don't want your provisions to go down too fast, you take a detour to the nearest lake or river to do some fishing. That means you're going to have to appoint one of your adventurers as the party's angler. You engage in this fun minigame, catch a few fishes, and carry on with the adventure. You finally find the guy you have to kill, but he makes a counter offer. You could take him up on his offer, but because you don't want to get on the authorities' bad side, you say screw you and you engage him and his friends in combat. Combat is turn-based, and because the build aspect of the game isn't too deep or complex, combat encounters are all about the decisions you make during the fight. And they can get pretty tactical. In fact, there are some boss fights that were unexpectedly challenging. This one took me quite a while to figure out. It was quite the tactical puzzle, I tell you, and I loved it if I'm honest with you. And though these combat encounters take place in ad hoc scenarios that are flat as a pancake, there is a surprising number of elements and conditions that add complexity and fun to the fight themselves. In fights that take place inside mines or caves, for example, there are stalactites that can fall on you or your enemies. In outdoor locations, there are muddy surfaces that slow down anyone who steps over them. And although there aren't any high grounds for you to use as vantage points, there is interesting topography that you can use to your advantage if you play it smart. Combat encounters in War Tales take place over rounds. And like some other turn-based games that you may be familiar with, War Tale uses a system of initiative. But there is a twist. Initiative is party-based in War Tales, rather than character-based. And this means that whenever it is your turn, you can switch to any character in your party that you have not used before this round. And this twist may be very simple in theory, but it has quite a bit of impact on the tactical aspect of the game. Some of the toughest fights in the game cannot be won unless you dominate this little twist in the formula. I did find the game lacking when it came to combat situations though. Combat in Expeditions Rome, for example, is pretty decent but nothing spectacular. However, the thrill of every combat encounter in that game is taken to the next level because every fight feels crucial to the story. When you're not fighting to survive an ambush, you're leading a daring rescue deep inside enemy territory, or a daring escape, or buying time for the main party to do their thing, or straight out leading an epic all-out assault against an enemy stronghold. Even regular quests that had nothing to do with the main mission had interesting victory conditions. Sometimes you had to ambush an enemy caravan and destroy all their cargo, sometimes you had to sneak in and rescue all the prisoners, and this makes a world of difference. But in War Tales, there's nothing ever at stake other than dinner if you're fighting pigs or wolves, or the bounty that you were promised for killing this or that bandit. I also don't think it would have been too much to ask for high grounds, crevices, and a little bit more variety on the topography of combat scenarios. There could have also been fights inside buildings or something. There could have been more combat-related things to do, like tournaments and arenas, or sieges like you have in Mount & Blade. Gear is not as varied or as plentiful as it is in games like Mount & Blade, but you do have named items, with a little yellow background as an indicator of their badassery. And every time you get one of those, you can feel the difference in your companion's fighting capabilities, and I think this is pretty cool. So the combat encounter is over, and it's time for you to go back and claim your reward. But there's only so much you can do in a day. Better set up camp, catch some shut-eye, and resume your journey in the morning. And this is, I kid you not, the most exciting aspect of War Tales. I think the camping function is grossly underutilized in most RPGs. Most of the times it's just a button that you click to restore your skills, and it comes at the cost of some camping supplies. The Pathfinders are a little bit more robust in this respect. The camping function in Kingmaker requires you to assign different people to different actions, and in Wrath of the Righteous you can even craft a few items while you camp. But games that actually see camping as a way to end the day and make preparations for what's to come are rare, and I think War Tales might just be the best of them. Your camp is like a mobile stronghold. You start out with nothing more than a campfire, but as the Tinkerer in your party becomes more experienced, and you want to have a Tinkerer, believe me, you'll be able to craft a tent in which some of your party members can sleep. And this is awesome because sleeping inside a tent gives your party members additional bonuses that make them better at combat. You'll also be able to craft a cauldron that will allow you to cook more elaborate dishes if you have a cook with the appropriate skill. Different meals give your party different collective bonuses, so you want to keep an eye out for the different recipes and ingredients that are for sale in the different towns you're going to be visiting. You'll also be able to craft a stratagem table, which will give you access to different battle strategies that add global perks to your party, such as flanking benefits, and these go a long way in combat encounters. Every once in a while, some of your party members will have something to share with the rest of the party. This is typically a concern that you'll have to address by choosing one of your other companions' suggestions, and this also has an impact on your party members' performance for the rest of the day. You'll also have to feed your party and pay their wages when necessary. I just love the camping feature in War Tales. It adds to the immersion and adventure aspects of the game like you wouldn't believe. Most especially if you play the game in Iron Man mode. Speaking of which, difficulty is customizable in War Tales, and there is of course the aforementioned Iron Man mode, which is mandatory for these types of games. But you can also save scum it if you want by choosing the free saves option. The game doesn't label you a pussy for doing it. The Pirates of Belerion DLC is out now, and it adds many new enemies, combat mechanics that are specific to that DLC, locations, and sailing. But we'll get around to that sometime next year. Next on the list is Star Traders Frontiers. This is a story-driven sandbox RPG that takes place in a space sci-fi setting. Unlike War Tales, Star Traders focuses more on questing, and that in turn means that it leans more heavily on its story. And this is a welcome twist for this subgenre. In sandbox RPGs, you usually start in the middle of nowhere with no purpose or guide. It's all for you to decide, and that's cool and all, but every once in a while it's nice to have story-driven stakes from the get-go. And although that's not a staple of this subgenre, Star Traders Frontiers says, why the heck not? Here, let me give your character a background, and here's an initial mission for you to undertake. A mission that will unfold into a large overarching quest that will keep you entertained for a good chunk of the game.
Well, all right.
Now, don't expect colony ship levels of writing here. If you want a proper story-driven CRPG with excellent writing and thought-provoking subtext, that's the game you should be looking at. The initial story in Star Traders is straightforward and unpretentious, but it's grounded in verisimilitude, easy to follow, and it's got high stakes. I also like how you become progressively involved in the whole thing. You start off as a service provider with nothing to lose, and by the end of the quest line, your actions and decisions become crucial to the outcome of the story. And yes, this is a thing in this game. You have dialogue options, and many of those have quite a significant impact on the outcome of the story. Some others are of course the illusion of choice. Star Traders Frontiers does not have as many secondary mechanics or survival elements as War Tales or Vagrus, but it does have an interesting gameplay mix. There's party-based combat, ship combat, exploration, questing, trading, ship management, party management, spying, blockading, you name it. And most of these things are pretty good. Combat works much like it does in Darkest Dungeon, and it's beyond decent. You have different types of fighters, combat skills, and weapons that work in interesting synergies. It's not Darkest Dungeon, but first, it's pretty damn close, and second, party-based combat is not all Star Traders Frontiers has to offer by any means. And though combat encounters are not as frequent or as varied as they are in War Tales, I did feel like there was always something story-related at stake. There was always something along the lines of, damn it, he died before we could interrogate him. Quick, the guards will be here any minute. Oh no, the guards are here. And like I said, this is the type of thing that elevates the thrill of a combat encounter beyond its mechanics. You have ship combat, which is also pretty interesting, especially when you face a ship that's better than yours. There are many viable strategies that you can pursue and many tactics to go with each of them, and more importantly, and I know this is going to be music to the ears of some of you, your ship's build plays a major role here. And yes, you have different ships and different guns with different types of damage, different optimal ranges, different advantages and disadvantages, and many other items that you can equip on your ship that have tactical value. I am actually quite impressed at how much I enjoyed this aspect of the game when I am not a huge fan of this type of combat. But the best thing about Star Traders Frontiers is that it lives by the old entertainment rule of character creation and character progression. For those of you who haven't been following the channel, it goes like this. A character creation system is only as good as the freedom it gives the player to experiment the game in his or her own terms. Which means that if a game has a certain something to offer, then the character progression system should have an array of options for you to engage with this certain something your way. In Star Traders Frontiers, you have a full crew of pilots, engineers, navigators, and mechanics that level up individually. And as you progress through the game, you face certain RNG challenges and, more importantly, some quests that require your party to have a certain talent. There are quests, for example, that require you to spy on a planet, and that involves a slot machine type of minigame that has possible outcomes. And you're going to have to play said slot machine type of minigame several times until you get the successful outcome. Well, you can give some of your crew members talents that increase your likelihood of success, like automatically discarding a bad outcome from the get-go or increasing the likelihood of you getting the mission success outcome. Similarly, for space combat situations, there are offensive and defensive skills that you can use to make the most out of your artillery or to increase the odds of making a successful escape. And you acquire these skills you see here when your gunners and navigators level up. You can choose to have a broad array of skills,
not a great plan.
Or you can choose to have multiple uses for the ones you find most useful.
Great plan.
So you can have all your navigators learn fast getaway so that you can use it multiple times when you are making long trips that require 3 or 4 galactic jumps to escape gnarly combat encounters that you would surely lose. And you can have all your E-Tech specialists learn the Vigilant Scanner's talent, which goes perfectly with those guns that are most effective when you are 4 and 5 spaces away from the enemy ship, especially if you have invested the big bucks on those types of guns. You also have pistoliers, swordsmen, soldiers, and combat medics for party-based combat. and as it happens in Darkest Dungeon, they have skills that can only be used when they occupy a certain slot. So you want to keep that in mind when you assign members to your ground combat party, when you acquire new skills, and when you equip new weapons and armor. And yes, equipping weapons and armor is something that you can do in this game. The quality of the items that you can equip on your party members depends on your ship's weapon locker, and this is a ship component that you can upgrade in some of the planets, and I think this is pretty cool. You also have 3 senior officers. These guys and gals, unlike the rest of your crew members, can have special professions like quartermaster, merchant, and chief engineer in addition to your regular professions. These professions are like your character's classes. Senior officers can multi-class, and some of these professions, like doctor and combat medic, have interesting synergies. Senior officers also make suggestions during dialogue sequences, they explain a few things about the ins and outs of the galaxy, and some can even develop an addiction to spice, which makes them say some pretty hilarious things. And for those of you who care about this, you can customize everything about them. Their names, their genders, their looks, their outfits, everything. So senior officers are the equivalent of companions in a CRPG. They are generic and lacking in personality, but they get the job done. But if you're one of those who says, well, in my mind I give these characters stories and personalities, and well, you are going to love these guys if that's the case. Trading is not as robust and complex as it is in Vagrus, but it has more weight and complexity than it does in War Tales. In this game, you have to keep an eye out for different types of planetary systems, the things they produce, the things that are in highest demand, black markets for your illegal smuggled goods, trade licenses for the different systems, etc. It's robust enough for you to make it your party's main thing, or you can run it as a side gig. Also consider that this game has a crazy enthusiastic community of modders that have boldly taken the IP where no man has gone before, with mods that go from ships to guns to professions to quests. And last but not least, the price tag for this game right now is ridiculously low on Steam. And then we have Vagrus, the Riven Realms. This one is a bit harder to appraise, because out of the 3 games that we're talking about today, this is the one I like the least, but at the same time, it's orders of magnitude better than the other 2 in some respects. And let's start with that. Vagrus features a world the likes of which you have never seen in a sandbox RPG, not even close. The game's lore is rich, robust, and engaging, more so than most RPGs out there, including the most story-heavy CRPGs. It takes place in a setting that resembles our own Earth around the times of the ancient Roman Empire. The thing is that after bearing witness to all the atrocities perpetrated by humanity's most tyrannical leaders in the name of their gods, said gods decided to punish all of humanity by bringing upon massive destruction on the world with all sorts of magical cataclysms and whatnot. So we are dealing with a post-apocalyptic ancient scenario with isolated pockets of humanity struggling to reach out to each other, twisted creatures that are the product of the magical effects that these cataclysms had on the various species that used to roam the world, and ever-dwindling resources that precious few have access to. The world of Vagrus feels like a crossover between our ancient Byzantium, Mad Max 3 Beyond the Thunderdome, and Fallout, with a generous serving of its own brand of Middle East-inspired fantasy. And that's pretty freaking dope if you ask me, which you didn't, but I tell you anyways. The game is also thick with historical and geographical references, and it genuinely feels like a world that has been around long before your character's time in it, and also much larger than the part you get to explore during your travels. You also get proper companions in Vagrus, not just generic husks with procedurally generated dialogue lines and no personality like you usually do in sandbox RPGs. There are also long, intricate multi-step quests with plot twists, rising actions that end in fantastic climaxes, lots of NPCs, and a lot of descriptive narration. It's a game that goes hard on the paint with its story and lore. Vagrus is very ambitious in the writing department. Unfortunately, that's also where the problems that I have with the game start. I think the guys who wrote Vagrus might have bitten off more than they could chew with this title, and let me explain. Companions and NPCs in this game often talk to each other about stuff they already know, just to get you, the player, up to speed about this or that relevant piece of information. And that's something that you just don't do. It's a serious no-no in writing regardless of the genre. It's not uncommon, but that doesn't mean it's good. Second, the writers often resort to elaborate rhetorical figures of speech that seem to be a little bit above their English level. Listen, I know what they were going for. They wanted to create an ancient, unique world that looks, feels, and sounds nothing like ours. So it follows that the game's dialogue lines, descriptions, and bits of narration should not sound like something some 20-year-old would say in the year 2023. And I think that's commendable, and I applaud the intention. But you can't tell that these guys' native language isn't English, so this fancy rhetoric often misses the mark, and it also comes off as a little bit pretentious and unnecessarily convoluted. If we weigh this issue against the game's massive lore and world building though, the latter still wins by a landslide. Again, this game trounces almost everything else you've played in the lore department, and the best part is that it feels grounded in verisimilitude and therefore immersive. The game's visual personality is also superbly consistent with the game's text. Everything in Vagrus feels like it's part of a cohesive whole. The other two games we just talked about feel shallow and simple by comparison. The gameplay mix consists of combat, exploration, questing, a lot of trading, and a lot of caravan management. Combat is turn-based and it uses a grid system not unlike the one in Bard's Tales 4. The grid system adds some depth to the combat, and there are some additional conditions and player-based global talents that add further complexity to combat encounters. Character progression in Vagrus is robust and quite unique. Your character is a caravan master. You are the one who talks to NPCs, you are the one who makes decisions, but you don't participate in combat. Not directly anyways. So when you level up, you can acquire perks that make you more efficient at social interactions or better at managing your caravan. But you have companions in Vagrus, and they also level up, and they have a series of attributes and skills that they can use in combat, as well as perks that make them more efficient in non-combat situations. Vagrus leans very heavily on its trading aspect, but I think the main focus of the game is crew management and survival. And that's all fine and dandy, but you should know that there are many ways in which you can shoot yourself in the foot with the caravan management aspect of the game. The problem is that you won't die immediately from the shot, but several days later from the bloodlust. In that sense, it works a little bit like Stellaris or some of those other grand strategy games, in which bad decisions may not seem like such at the time, but will surely end up undoing your whole empire at some point. It's like waking up one day, realizing your life is miserable and thinking, damn, I should have married that girl 20 years ago and studied informatics engineer instead of social communication. Damn, if I had only known about that underground black water leakage that had been silently wrecking my house. I guess the moral of the story is that every loss is a lesson no matter how far you are in the game, and you can always turn your life around. But taking a big L in War Tales or in Star Traders Frontiers will surely set you back quite a bit compared to your average CRPGs. But in Vagrus, a big L can completely destroy you, maybe even force you to start over from scratch. And the beginning of the game is like a 3-hour scripted tutorial, during which you cannot save whenever you wish, by the way, that you are going to have to go through again whenever you start over. You can skip it, but it's
not a great plan.
Overall, Vagrus is the paragon of niche RPGs. If you are the game's target audience, you are surely going to think this is the best game ever made. And with good reason, the game's freaking awesome if I am honest with you. But to me, it's like a fancy, nice-smelling room with a breathtaking view in a 5-star hotel with awesome room service. The only problem is that you have a nail bed instead of a regular bed. And when you ask in the reception if they have any regular beds, they give you a puzzled look and tell you, that's the standard bed around here. Vagrus also has a new high-level full-fleshed expansion pack that features a new location, a new story, which is the thing that I am the most excited about, warring factions, and new enemies. I repeat though, a high-level expansion, which means that you have to get there first, and die. A lot. So these are the 3 Sandbox RPGs that I have been playing and enjoying quite a lot lately. And I thought I'd bring them to your attention, since big names like Mountain Blade, Battle Brothers, and Kenshi seem to get the lion's share of the attention on this little corner of the RPG world. So what do you think? Do you find any of them interesting? If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, thank you for watching all the way up until now. If you like what you are seeing on this channel, please consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell to avoid the usual YouTube shenanigans. Come check us out on Discord if you don't mind all the boomer talk that goes on there. I personally love it and wouldn't change it for anything. Share the video if you thought it was cool, but most importantly, never stop gaming, but don't let gaming get in the way of your hopes and dreams. Bye everyone.